Picking on Drew now. Um, the thing to do is to excuse myself for, not preparing properly. But I had a lot of ideas bouncing around in my head and really didn't get anything hammered out till I think it was Friday night. Anyway, and I keep a list on my phone for ideas to talk about in the future. And one of them I had written down somewhere was keeping God central in our lives, or as Drew ended up putting on the YouTube, I think it was keeping God in his place, which sounds a little funky, but is what it is. And Drew kind of got my brain going last week when he was talking about hating your family and such like that, and in comparison to loving God. And then Brad mentioned something too, wherever he went. So that's what we're going to look at today. It's something I've definitely struggled with. So studying into something that I've had a tough time with is also always good for me. So we're going to get right into it. The first thing I thought of, and it's always this good thing to confirm, is why should God be first in our lives? What reason is there for that? And the real basic thing there is Deuteronomy 6:5, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might. So, real basic reason we're supposed to keep God central in our lives. He said so. And on that note, why should we do what God tells us to? Because again, when my brain starts going, then I follow a progression of questions. And here's my simple go-to answer whenever somebody says, why should we do what God says? Of course, there are a lot of reasons, but here's my go-to. Genesis 1:26 through 27. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man as in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. He made us. He's kind of in charge of the universe, I've noticed. Keeps us going here. I don't really argue with that. There are lots of reasons. We love God because he first loved us. We do what he says because he's taking care of us. It's a mutually beneficial relationship here on a selfish level. But when it comes down to it, God made us. We are responsible to him. He's in charge of our lives. So, little sidebar there. So going back to the reason we're supposed to love God and keep him central in our lives. The whole law, which is what God was saying to us, saying to the children of Israel, was summed up by Jesus in Matthew 22. Matthew 22:37. Jesus said unto him, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. Sorry, I guess I should be sitting back there. Anybody want to take over for me quick? So what does it mean to love God with all our hearts? I'll open that up. What do you guys do in your lives? Practical, everyday things that like, how do you love God? Anybody?
Giving thanks.
Praising God, giving him thanks. We talked about it in Sunday school here. Giving God glory. What was that? Trusting God. That's a very true thing. Trusting him that he's going to take care of us. One of the recurring themes in Daniel was giving God glory. And that's something we can do today too. I'll touch on that some more later too. Anybody else?
Acknowledging that all the ambition and wisdom we have to get anything done is a gift from him.
The ambition and wisdom that for anything we want to do,
Yeah, to get anything done.
to get anything done, is from Him. That's a really good way of putting it. It brings it into a little bit more reality. Everything we have is because of God. He created us. He gave us everything we've got. And I can't think of the verse right now, but we are nothing without God when it comes down to it.
You asked, how do we show that we love God?
Yes. How do we keep God central in our lives? How do we show that we love God?
So if you love someone, you focus on it and figure out how to please them. Like you give it thought and effort.
You went right where my mind went first. For me, in simple terms, that's how I understand things best. I think I can compare it to how I love my family, and how I spend my time. Almost everything I do every day is focused on my wife and my children, and my church family, and my extended family. But it's mainly my little nuclear family here. And yet, when I think about it, I go to work to provide for them. I think about them during the day and what I'm doing during the day. I talk to them often during the day. I talk about them often during the day. My coworkers, I'm sure, get tired of hearing about my kids. Other than Amy, she's 16. She really enjoys looking at kids' pictures of their kids and hearing all their little fun stuff. Things I do when I get home that's mostly focused on keeping things going there. Yesterday we mowed the grass and we put up peaches and beans and peas. Well, mostly Melissa, Carolyn did that, but it's all things for my family. All the things that we're doing for my family. And I do a lot of other stuff too. We went over and did firewood. We're taking care of our church family. Another way of showing love. I do stuff for myself too. I enjoy fishing and this and that. And also for our neighbors. I go and do firefighting stuff to love my neighbors, as we're instructed to do. But the time and the focus and the energy in your life goes to what you love. And that's kind of a comparison for me. What do I do every day to keep God central in my life, to focus on that and my love for Him? Also, all that stuff, and I was going to mention this, taking care of your family, loving your neighbor, and all that's included in that, that is showing love for God, because we are following His instructions. And looking out for what we need. You have to pardon me as I drink here. I have a hard time staying hydrated on the weekends because I keep doing other stuff at work. I just have my cup there and I can just drink from it whenever I want. But something I got to work on for my own self, huh? Anyway, back to the main idea here. I need to have the majority of what I do every day be focused on God. And I think we already talked about this. A lot of what we're doing is what God told me to do. Are there any other ways you guys focus on God specifically? For me, it's learning about Him through personal devotions, family devotions. When we get that far, it's really, I'm sure you guys know this, but it's really tough to get 4 kids that are young to all sit down for family devotions, unless you can make it really interesting. Keeping my eyes open during the day to see how He works through the everyday things, which sometimes you get just focused on what you're doing and you don't see how God works. It's really great where I work. I mean, there's bad things about it too, but it's really great where I work. You meet all kinds of people, and a lot of the time you meet different sorts of Christians that come up, and it's really kind of cool talking to them and just being able to share back and forth with them. We should talk with Him, listen to Him. I mentioned that I talk to my family throughout the day. It's really great to have the technology we have now and to listen to them and be able to even voice message to children. It's great. I need to keep my heart open during the day for that, for God. As we talked about in Daniel, glorify Him. in everything we do, and that's something I really need to work on. I find it really easy to, when something goes right for me, that's just me, like Jaden said, all my aspirations to do a good job, that deck project worked out really great for that guy, and he said, what a nice job I did. Yeah, that feels good. But, it doesn't hurt at all, and of course, like we said earlier in Sunday school, you have to be careful about sharing your religion sometimes. But there's no reason we can't pass the glory to God. Lost my place here. Is there anything that you guys do throughout the day? I've got one more thing, but I want to hear from you. Anything else you guys do during the day that helps you to focus on God, to give him glory?
I try to listen to good stuff. Or watch good YouTube things that kind of focus on, that's something I do intentionally. I'm like, okay, enough of like Instagram and Facebook. I'm going to go wash dishes and watch this is an upbuilding podcast or
You watch videos on YouTube while you're washing dishes? Hey, yeah. Carolyn, did you hear that? I'm not the only one. That's a really good point. To have all those good things in front of you, either listening to Bible-based or music or podcasts or whatever it may be about God, building that up in your life and building up the good in your life, or watching videos. And there's a lot of horrible stuff on the internet, but there's so much good out there too. That's a really good thing to remember.
Maybe this has been said before, but it's something I need to work on, but I like to do when I can, is acknowledging God's presence throughout the day. Like, we tend to separate God from our everyday life. Like, I'm going to have my quiet time now, and this is my relationship with God. Whereas God wants to be involved in every aspect of our life, the details. And God's not too small to be interested in the details of our life.
That's really true, and it's something that, for me, I'll just say it again, having God in all the little details of your life. And every time I do that, like even when I'm working on the truck or whatever it may be, just realizing God is there with you. Every time I do that, which is more rare than it should be, it's always really great. I replaced the fuel pump on my truck a while ago, so then you let it run for a little bit, and then I was replacing the fuel filter, and I was just struggling with it because the bolt was seized up, of course. And then I ended up getting fuel in my eyes, and then I had to sit there and flush them for a while, and anyway, a bunch of messing around. And then, of course, I took my contacts out, and then I couldn't see what I was doing. And at some point in there, I was praying, and life got better. But I didn't do it soon enough. So that's a really good thing to remember, is the little things in life God is still interested in.
Abram noted that one thing he tries to do is he tries to represent God accurately.
Abram tries to represent God accurately. As in a witness type thing?
I think he was talking about throughout the day, but
I would take that to mean that as a Christian in the workplace or wherever you may be, laying under your truck in your driveway and people driving past you, that you would be representing Christ that way. One of the things I'd like to mention, and this is going to lead into another one, is obedience to his word and to the leadings of the Spirit. And for me, this can be one of the most enjoyable things or one of the toughest things in life, is obedience. And just for an example, because I'm not going to go into everything that God tells us to do, loving your neighbor as yourself. It's usually really enjoyable for me to do that. I enjoy helping people, and that's why I work in customer service. and doing things for other people. It's fun, but then sometimes it's really, really hard to love certain people. Like that one fella that comes in the lumberyard and is always a pain. And even my family at times, I'm always such a wonderful father, as we all are, that are fathers. But it's tough sometimes. And that obedience is showing love for God. And that's a big thing for me. To do throughout the day and throughout life is just obedience, and then in all the other ways too. I mean, there are a lot of things, again, summed up in love God and love your neighbor, but some of them are pretty tough to do. I'm not gonna just harp on that for a while, but I think we all probably know areas in our lives that we struggle to obey God, and I think we all know what we need to work on. And if you see any that I need to work on, let me know. Going into this, again, love God, love your neighbor, was another aspect, and I hadn't really thought about it this way because there have been a lot of times that this has been covered, but clearly states, Exodus 20, verse 3, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." Has anybody never heard a sermon about idolatry, idols, putting things before God? I'm sure you have, with all the YouTube you watch while you're doing dishes. It's been covered. But there was one thing, that's the kind of the standard thing, and I don't want to demean anything, is make sure that objects and activities don't come between you and God. Don't let the sport you play, don't let your vehicle, don't let your computer game or your music or whatever it may be, don't let that become an idol that's higher than God in your priority list. And I've failed there at times, but I feel like usually the Spirit clamps down and I get back on track, and it's probably due to all the sermons I've heard, which good instruction goes a long way. Now I'm probably going to have some real struggles with it this week, but anyway, so check in on me. But now that you stick your mouth out, right? Another aspect of this came to mind recently, and Drew mentioned it last week about hating your family in comparison to loving God, and I won't get onto that again. And then Brad mentioned it too. In comparison, how other people should be. By the way, I think that was from Luke 14. I assume that's where you got it from. Anyway, if somebody wants to look it up, but I won't read it out. I think another side of that we can look at is letting human relationships with other people come between us and God. Now, I don't want this to be taken the wrong way, like Drew said last week. No, we aren't actually supposed to hate people. It's just supposed to look like that in comparison to how we love God. We're instructed to have good relationships and to care for one another and love one another. And this can be taken as you wish, I skipped church a couple weeks ago so that I could train to love my neighbors better, because one of the ways that I do that is through emergency services, and I'd like to be able to help people that way. But what I'm getting at in this relationship here is that we need to make sure that we aren't relying on another person when we should be relying on God. We need to make sure that we don't have a person in our lives that's taking the place of God or the aspects of God. There's a great benefit to having good leadership, and we've had some really good leadership in our church here. But my relationship with, Drew at this time is not going to save my soul. It's not what he's here for. That's not what all of our leaders are for. They're to lead, but not to take the place of God and Christ. It's really wonderful when a husband and wife can rely on each other for emotional support, but that can't take the place of bearing our hearts to God and having Him help us. And this is something I hadn't really thought about before, and it's definitely something I've done. In the same way I can't rely on Lance and Christine to instruct my children in righteousness in the ways of the Bible. It's great. They're doing a wonderful job here as the children's Sunday school. But that can't take the place of me helping them to learn more about God. And it can't take the place of, as they get a little older, their personal relationship with God. You can't just let somebody take over that for you. Now, I don't want to push this too far. I think you know what I'm getting at. But you can't... all of these relationships and leadership and going even just different Bible schools and stuff, it's really, really great and important. But when it comes down to it, all of this is to lead to a closer relationship with God. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that? Are there places where it's easy for us to have a human relationship take over where our relationship with God should be?
Christine and I have noticed that in our marriage that we have to be careful that we're not relying on each other for our happiness or our strength or whatever.
That was something when Carolyn and I were talking about it, she mentioned too. It's, I'm supposed to be the spiritual leader in our home, but I'm not perfect. And I'm going to be the first to admit that. And I failed a lot in that area. And with my failure rate, if my wife doesn't have a relationship with Christ, we're going to have a problem. And vice versa. I can rely on Carolyn for emotional support and everything, and somebody to pray with and such like that. And, do Bible studies with. We haven't done enough of that. But when it comes down to it, we're both human. And we can't rely on each other fully as we can for God. Isaiah 41:10, "Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee. Yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness." He is there for us in everything. He's everything we need. And then he gives us each other because we're all human. Is how I view it. Because I need human relationships as well. But when it comes down to it, he is our go-to. He is our first relationship, our first love. Anybody else have a thought on that? Any other places where our human relationships can take over where we're supposed to be relying on God?
Well, I know it's very easy when you listen to somebody for it's godly to just kind of go with what he says without checking the words of the Bible or what he was accurate or whatever. But I mean, eventually you can just trust someone so much that you just almost have him in place of God. You go to him asking those questions which you know he'll answer instead of God, when he should be going to God. You can put somebody on a pedestal to that point where I think it's going to affect your relationship with God.
Well, like we said, you can't, we're all fallible. We're human. And when you, as Ina said, when you put somebody up on a pedestal for your leadership, or you're taking everything they say as gospel truth, or as God's word, think about it. It's important to remember. And
I could remind myself to rely on God and rely on God on the person.
we need to rely on God to supply our needs and not way we make money. Because when it comes down to that, using that great block, the entire base could fall out of the lumber market at any moment, and I would be out of a job. But God is always going to be there to provide.
You ask if a relationship can take the place of your relationship with God. Yes. If it's an unhealthy relationship, yes. A healthy relationship will enhance your relationship with God. And there are two types, and I've seen both. The healthy ones will spur you on to a greater relationship. The healthy ones will make God, help you center God where He ought to be in your life. The unhealthy ones will be trapped. It will stress you out. They will make you feel horrible about yourself and horrible about your healthy relationships. And yes, those unhealthy ones can take the place of God. And not only that, but looking to somebody to take the place of God in your life as you're putting a pedestal down.
Clark brought up a really good point there, and that's something I was trying to get at, and I couldn't quite put it into words. A healthy relationship improves your relationship with God, and an unhealthy relationship can take the place of that relationship, except it never fills you up. And I've seen that a lot in the world, if you will, where the people that I know, even some of the customers and the people that I work with, they're always looking for more fulfillment in life. And I do that too. And then I realize, oh, I'm missing something here. Always looking for that next thing that can make you feel more fulfilled and that you have a relationship and something meaningful in your life. And if you're missing God, that's going to never, your human relationships can't take the place of God. It doesn't work. And I've even heard drug addicts say that same thing. They're looking for something. And the drugs just can't get them there. And they're always looking for the next high. And that's why we carry naloxone. Because they aren't ever going to find it. And eventually it'll kill them. Going back, I think we've hammered out this relationship thing. And we know where we're at on that. Are there other things in our life? No, we've talked about this, but are there other things in our lives that can take the place of that relationship?
For me, I get lost in doing things for God. So all the good things that I do, I sometimes, I struggle with that just being good one. And God has to very gently always remind me of, I just want you to be kind. I don't want your actions. I don't want, like if I work at the center and counseling people, I go, well then I'm good. I've done my quota. I've done my good deed for the day, and now I'm good. And I think for me, that's my, like one of my weaknesses is, I just kind of go, okay, I've done this, so now I don't need to spend time with you anymore because you helped me through this thing, so we're good to go. And he actually wants more than that. He wants like everything, not just my good deeds.
That actually hits really close to home because a few years ago, an elf helped me with that and made me look at myself. I was getting lost a bit in the fire service, and letting that. It's a good work. I'm the first to say that. It's not for everybody. It's different things for different people. Like you said, you work up at the center there, but when what you're doing for God starts taking the place of your relationship with God, and you're letting this take over, and you're being a good Boy Scout and doing your good deed for the day, and then you're all set. You and God are sitting even for the day because you've done your good deed. It's not how it works. He needs a relationship, not just works. He doesn't need the blood of animals and the sacrifice and lack of sleep or extra work. He needs us to be there listening and talking to him and telling our troubles and putting our burdens on him, because he is there to hold us up. And he needs our praise and when I say God needs, he really doesn't need anything, but that's how the relationship is set up. That's a really good point to bring out. Anybody else? We're done a little bit earlier than I thought, but that's all I have to share. In closing, let's remember. Oh, go ahead, Clark.
Very near skirted I want to call it a hobby horse of mine. So I just want to jump right on the horse and ride it a little bit. So when you're in a family life, invariably, your children and the needs of your wife will apparently supersede your relationship. I'm talking about these set quota quiet time you have for yourself. That's not bad. If you happen to miss that 15 minutes, half hour, or whatever, because your child had a question or you needed to talk to your wife, don't feel guilty about that, because God has commanded us to be with our family, to take care of our family. I don't think he expects that rigorous of a legalistic view on, I'm dominating this part of your life, so you don't have time for your family. I kind of disagree with that. Now, however, I tend to go the wrong direction on that. You're like, oh, I'm talking to my wife, I don't need to quiet time. There's a balance there. But I've seen it too often taken too hard the other direction. And I don't think that our relationship with God should ever cost us the relationships that he has put us in charge of. That's my little hobby horse. You can disagree with me afterwards if you want.
I actually, that hits directly home for me. I usually get up, and the first thing I do is I put my headset on and I listen to my daily Bible devotional thing while I'm putting my contacts in and this and that, getting my lunch ready and whatever else I may do. And I haven't said this to Carolyn because I knew it was a wrong thing to do, but then Carolyn comes upstairs and she wants to talk to me before I leave for the entire day. And I've caught myself at different times thinking to myself, well, I'm trying to listen to the Bible here. Would you shut up? And then God, of course, comes along in the Spirit and gently tells me, no, you need to not do this right now because your family needs you. And you need your family. And that's something that I miss a lot of the time. And every time that we have, those nice conversations in the morning, my day is better for it.
Word of counsel to all of you people that do not have family. Develop those quiet time habits beforehand and tank up. Because there'll come a time in your life where it's going to be really, really hard and you'll end up, dare I say, missing now and then. Tank up on your quiet time and develop those habits early. I didn't do as well as I should have, and I still struggle with finding that time.
Something I've also found, and that's very true what Clark said, is when your life starts getting busier, not to say that single people without children aren't busy, because there's lots of stuff for them to do, but when you are so busy with your family, you do tend to start missing that stuff. But one thing I found is when I didn't get up early enough and I'm in a bit of a rush and I'm starting to miss some of that quiet time because my family is up now, I usually, seems like I find a block of time later in the day when I can do it. And it just seems to work out nicely for that. So in closing, unless somebody else has something.
Well, I really appreciate the emphasis on not being so spiritual that we tell our wives to shut up. But I wonder if you'd have any thoughts on the flip side of it, where it really is important to be in relationship with God for me and for my wife. And I can, even if I have to tell my wife, even if I had to turn off the Bible so I can talk to my wife or stop praying, I can get in the car and start praying again. And she doesn't do that as much. And so I'm wondering, what are things that we can do to help our spouses, and I guess on both sides, help each other spend that time with the Lord that we want. Not in a legalistic sense, but I mean, we could have a whole conversation about motivation for reading our Bible. Is it so I don't feel guilty, or is it so because I want to know God better? But if our wives or our husbands want to know God better, but they're struggling because of family and responsibility and spouse and stuff, what are things we could do to help them?
So what are things we can do to help our spouses be able to have that time? And in case Carolyn is listening in the back, don't stop talking to me in the morning. But what can we do to help our spouses get that time we need? Because it is important, really important, to have that time alone with God, to learn about Him, to talk to Him, to listen. Any thoughts on that? Practical application here we're talking.
When your wife vanishes from the scene and leaves you with the kiddos for a half hour, just let her do it. Yeah, don't go looking there. The children will come looking with you.
Go find Mom.
Yeah. And there are other points in my life where where's Charlotte? What's she doing? You know, maybe when the kids are off to bed or being early, then your wife needs that time. And that's one of the challenges. Your wife doesn't have to be involved. How do I say this? One of the things I personally have to work on is helping, see the children get to bed. And then maybe my wife would have that hour of half hour whatever to herself. Or in the morning, she'll get up. Sometimes, same thing I do, she'll have an hour in the morning. But respect that. It doesn't, let her have that peace. And I mean, that's something I need to work on in my own home. That's more of a challenge for myself because I'm stepping on my own toes when I say that.
In our society here as Grace, generally speaking, it's the guys going off to work and the wife's staying to take care of the children and the house and everything else they do. It's really important, like Clark said, to make sure that we can take over some of that responsibility as needed and let our wives have that time that they need.
I hear a lot of you, and it's true. The children make it worse. Well, in case of you have some pie in the sky to have the children, this is not a problem. Get it wrong. When you get older, your sleep patterns may change. You might not know when your spouse is getting up, and you're in the middle of having your quiet time, and something like that. I think, for us, it's respect, and I'm hearing this, respect each other's quiet time to the best of your ability, and realize that sometimes your quiet time is going to get bombed because of other things.
Respecting each other's quiet times. That's a really good point. One thing that I've thought of, and it's been tough, I don't think we've done it more than a couple of times, is being able to send your wife away for a weekend. Breastfeeding, it's really hard to do that. I mean, without the children, for some spiritual regeneration and what's the term for
Solitude.
that too, or to a women's retreat for some revival time.
Yeah. When I send my wife away on solitude, I always like her to take the children with her.
It's really good to do that, but anyway, in closing, I think Drew has this lyrics up, but if we know you are my all in all, hi guys, we're gonna sing that now if Drew would lead out in that, and I'm gonna step away from the mic.